Okay. Welcome everybody, especially those who came out in this lovely weather. We're very happy that it is raining here in New Bern, and we've been in a drought situation for a while, so our flowers and our bugs and our environment love this weather. Some other people don't, but today I want to thank people for coming out, and any of those on Zoom. The Carolina Nature Coalition is hosting the Sound Rivers presentation today. Carolina Nature Coalition has collaborated with Sound Rivers for a long time. As a matter of fact, most of the past Lower Neuse River keepers are still on our email list. So we stay in contact with them. Today, we will have Clay Barber, who is the, my eyes are not that good, okay, Environmental Projects Coordinator for Sound River. Clay was educated here in Eastern North Carolina. Yeah, he holds 2 degrees from ECU, one in Recreation and Park Management, and an MS in Sustainable Tourism, and a certificate in Stormwater Management from state. Okay. Clay oversees Sound River's restoration and stormwater programs, as well as the Pamlico River Trail. Clay will talk about some water projects and using them to educate current and future stewards of the environment. So right now, I give it to Clay.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro, and thanks everybody for braving the weather to come and see us talk about rain and stormwater. I am the Environmental Projects Coordinator for Sound Rivers, so our campus stormwater program keeps me the busiest, I would say, except for this couple weeks I'm in right now. We're starting our swim guide program, and we're doing water quality sampling all over the place, from Raleigh down to Oriental and Lake Royale down to the Pungo River in Washington. So trying to get that going, but our campus stormwater program is primarily through grant-funded projects and a variety of grant programs. So they all have their little necessities and requirements. Every grant project is different. Every site location is different, but they are all at school campuses, whether they be elementary schools or middle schools, high schools, even community colleges and universities. We are partnered with around 24 schools right now in both watersheds, quite a few down here in Craven County. Let's see, do we have the slide up there? And that way I'll start talking and then I'll get off. This slide is just as much for me to stay on track as it is for y'all to learn stuff. So there's no quiz at the end, and this is being recorded. So this is a new presentation I've been working on. We get a lot of inquiries about this program. It's pretty unique. Our grant funders would call it innovative because I guess stormwater management occurs and science education occurs, but they don't really occur at the same places at the same time, and that's a thing that we're trying to shift. We want the next generation of people to, look at our green stormwater infrastructure projects as the norm and something that ought to be done and something that they have the education to do, because we need clean water, and people need an education, and people need jobs, and we can knock all that out with this type of work. So I'll just kind of break down the process to begin with. Don't worry about reading all that stuff if you can't really see it very well. It's kind of thick, but like I said, this is something that we share with a lot of folks via the internet that have questions about how everything works. So to sum it up pretty briefly, we work with the entire, we call it the team. It's the school administration staff, it's the grounds crews, it's the teachers, student clubs, anybody that is going to be impacted at the school. We involve first thing early on. We get them to know the engineers and us, and there's never anybody that doesn't know everybody on the team, and that's valuable for a lot of different reasons. Our school administrators have an idea of what they want their school to look like and what the curriculum ought to be, and then our grounds crews are the people making everything happen. They're the ones cutting the grass and seeing the problems when it rains and having to deal with it. And our science teachers are usually who steps up and get excited about stormwater projects, because you can teach a lot off of these things. But anyway, we meet up with them and we discuss, what kind of stuff is already in the school curriculum. Are you teaching science courses, engineering, math, anything that we can tie to our water quality projects, environmental science, whatever it is. Horticulture, 4-H, we've had all those, FFA. And then we see, do they have any problems around campus? Do they have any future plans? Are they about to build a brand new giant building? Are they about to pave a new parking lot? Do they have standing water in one of their old parking lots, and everybody's getting their feet wet when they go to and from their vehicles? So we just spend a good time talking with them about that, touring the entire campus. Some people already have stormwater control measures. That's what we call any project that is handling stormwater. So we call it a stormwater control measure, or a SCM. So some campuses have stormwater control measures and aren't even really aware of it. And maybe they've just fallen out of maintenance. And so we don't have to do a whole lot. We just need to tell them how to get what they have back in the best working condition. Sometimes we have big opportunities where we can build big new projects. It is really site specific. No area is the same. That's what I think I enjoy about it. I show up to these places and I feel like an investigator. I'm like, where's the water going? Why is it going there? How fast is it going? How much is going there? And why? And what's happening because of it? And then we kind of go from there. So we have our school staff, and we bring some engineers. This gentleman in the photo right here, that's Mitch Woodward. He's a special agent from NC State Cooperative Extension. He's been in the rain garden and rainwater harvesting business for a lot longer than I think he would care to admit. I think he's pretty close to retirement and is very excited about it, but the guy is a wealth of knowledge, and I've never seen anybody more excited about stormwater. So I love working with Mitch, and he's pointing out a downspout that is draining water off the roof in this photo. But to continue our process, after we've toured our campus with the team, we go back and we take all the potential projects that we've listed, and we go back and we rank them in an order, and we call that a multiple criteria analysis decision matrix, if you can cram all that into your mouth. MCDA for short. But these are some of the things that we look at. Is our project, let's say we're talking about a rain garden, and we'll break down what that really is in a minute. But Is that rain garden going to provide the maximum amount of water quality treatment? Is it going to be suitable for that site? Is it going to see are a lot of people going to see it? Or is it behind the school where not many people are going to see it ever? Is it innovative? Are we going to do something different with this site, or is it just going to be another rain garden? Which is fine if it works, but I'll tell you, grant funders love the term innovative. Is it aesthetically pleasing? We don't want to build anything that nobody wants to look at. There's quite a bit of compromise in this project. But that's just because we found out that when people like stuff, they're much more likely to take care of it. And then, how much does it cost? Is it feasible for us to do it? Do we have the staff power? Do we have the expertise? And so on and so forth. So that's some of the things that go into our decision-making process. And if we can all find somebody or find a project that we all agree on, and think and get excited about, we shift into our design and planning and construction phase, and that can take quite a while, and it's also probably the scariest part for the school administrators. A lot of times the science teachers and the grounds crew or the master gardener or whatever, they're super jazzed about what we're doing, and they're like, how can we help? What can we do? Whatever you say, great. Sometimes it's the principals and the folks that are getting little snippets of what's going on. They get a little nervous. They're like, wait a minute, you're bringing a bulldozer in where? You're going to tear up my lawn for what? How long is this going to take? So that's, again, my job to kind of smooth everything over and be like, this is one of those instances where it may have to get a little worse before it gets better visually. We had a project like that you'll see later in the slide. It's always worth it. That's what I tell them. Some of these things get better with time. But in this photo right here, we're just kind of mid-construction on a pretty big wetland project at Beaufort County Community College in Washington, I'm based in Washington. Today I was working out of the New Bern office, which is, I could throw a ball and hit it from here. So this worked out nice, but usually I'm in Washington, right across the street from Bill's Hot Dogs on the waterfront. So sweet office spot. But we had to get some pretty big equipment on site for this, so I had to do a lot of reassuring that we knew what we were doing and that it was going to look good. That crane was putting in like a 17,000 pound concrete structure that we had custom made for that project. So a lot of our projects are not this extensive. This was the biggest project I've had my hands on since I've been here. And we'll see what it looks like now a little bit later, but the construction project can be anything from myself and a group of students building a small rain garden or putting in a small rain barrel, or it could be a contracted and subcontracted job that is over $150,000. It just kind of depends on how much grant funding we got and where we are and what we're working with. So very interesting array. And once we have built things, we agree to monitor and help maintain them for about a year, because anytime you do big construction like that, there's bound to be, the grass didn't take up very well right here, and there's a little bit of erosion happening, and we'll turn right around and get that fixed before it becomes a real issue. A lot of times the grounds folks are excited, but a lot of times they're sitting there going, man, I'm going to have to weed eat around that thing, or I'm going to have to do X, Y, Z. So we try and give them a nice punch list of maintenance needs. We try and build stuff as low maintenance as possible. And it works out well because they learn how to maintain these things outside of your traditional landscaping practices of, cut the grass as low as possible and get the water off site as fast as possible. We work with them to kind of, give them the foundation of, these stormwater practices aren't just for looks. They're designed to slow water down, spread water out, and let it soak in. That's a key point in stormwater management. Slow it down, spread it out, soak it in. Almost every practice kind of has that goal. So we make sure that happens. We make sure it looks good. Everything blooms that we planted. Everything stays in place that we built. And all these they agree to is to maintain them once we're done with everything that we've agreed to do. Here in this picture, this is a student group called the Environmental Alliance Club, and there's just a group of kids who are especially excited about environmental conservation and this type of work. So I was taking them around our wetland. As part of our education phase, as we like to call it, we put these signs next to our practices, no matter what they are, because we want people to know what they're looking at. Because this is not new. People have been creating wetlands for a long time. They just are lost on people. It'll be something on the side of the freeway when they built an overpass, and the state said you're required to offset your environmental impact by building a wetland over here in the median. But they don't tell people that when they're done with the project. It's just there, and people just zoom past it at 70 miles an hour. So it was cool for me once I took that course at NC State, the inspection and maintenance course for stormwater control measures. I started seeing things I couldn't not see things. I couldn't drive down the street without being like, oh, look at that. You know, that would be a good spot for a rain garden, or that's a detention pond that's been maintained poorly, or look at all those external downspouts on that roof you could catch water of. I think my friends probably get sick of it sometimes. They're like, Clay, who cares? Why are you snooping around the back of these buildings? What are you doing? I said, I can't help it. It's fascinating, and it's everywhere. So we try and educate. We started this because we wanted to educate students at school campuses, but I'm educating teachers and grounds crews and principals and just random people passing by wondering what the heck we're doing over there. So I'm just ready to educate folks about stormwater at all times, because I never know when people are like, what are you doing? So yeah, that's just kind of a overview of the process of our campus stormwater program, and just you know, why we should do that in a little more detail. Why I think this program is especially important is first and foremost water quality. That's our organization's main goal. And school campuses, just by the nature of their design, have a lot of impervious surface that water just can't penetrate, and so it's going to go somewhere. And in a lot of cases, it goes there pretty fast. And we don't like fast-moving water in the stormwater business because it does not allow time for any pollutants in the water to go anywhere except for in the water. So that a lot of times we start with a ditch that is just somebody's keeping it mowed down to nothing, and when water comes into it, it rockets right through it and on to the next destination. And we'll kind of select those areas as like, hey, this is a place that we could widen to accept more runoff water, and we could make it really windy in a channel so that it takes more time to get from point A to point B, and we can put rock check dams so that it kind of has to filter through them and all those things, and it's all just in an effort to slow it down, spread it out, soak it in. But outside of water quality and impervious surfaces, it's especially important to me that it is something that can bring the community together. You know, if we got a group of kids wondering how they can impact their community, or say a group of employees that work for a large company and they're in an office all day and they have a team building day, we will get inquiries from them, say, hey, you know, what can we do to help our community as a team? And this is just something that everybody can come together on. We've had volunteers, we've had students, we've had staff, we've had specialists come together to help build these things. And a lot of that education and that getting together and collaboration, it breeds a respect, and there's a term that I'm looking for, and it's escaping me right now. But it helps develop the workforce of stormwater management. So when I see something that has been poorly maintained, and I go to search for a company that is not your average landscaping company, somebody who specializes in taking care of these things, I have extremely limited options. There's like 2 companies, especially in eastern North Carolina. I don't know why, but you know, there's a lot more options west of Raleigh for some reason. So I want to see that change. I want people to just recognize that there's money to be made here as a professional. I mean, to do these projects, I'm hiring engineers and paying them good money out of our grant funding. We're hiring biological and agricultural specialists to analyze the area. We're calling in agencies to do study reports with other scientists involved. We are calling in NC 811 and all the local private location guys to mark everything that's underground. We're paying contractors. We're paying rock quarries to give us some scraps that they got left over so we can filter some water. It's just a lot. There's a lot of hands in a lot of places. There's a lot of money moving around, and I just don't think people realize that. They look at it and they think, how much could it possibly cost to dig a hole to store water? And it's like, man, it is not that simple, and it's not that cheap. So if a kid came up to me and said, I want to be a stormwater management engineer, I would just be filled with happiness. So the first step is just getting it in their face. You know, a kid will look at one of these things and go, what is that? Why is it there? They'll ask all the questions, and we'll provide all the answers. So yeah, that's all the reasons that we love this program and why we encourage it everywhere that we go. And we've been using this term, green stormwater infrastructure. What is it? This is a short list of all the different things that people might build when they say green stormwater infrastructure. Rain gardens, I've already heard a lot of people in this room say rain gardens. It's a popular one. It's fairly easy to do. Constructed stormwater wetlands are a bit of a step up. Those can be kind of big projects. I mean, a wetland is a biodiverse, dynamic environment, and it's not an easy task to recreate one. It wasn't until we built one of those that I figured out that native wetland plant farming is a career. And there's only one person that I know of to call whenever we need wetland plants in big quantities. So, you know, just something else I didn't know before I got this job. Rainwater harvesting cisterns, that's actually what you're looking at in the photo. That is at Nash Community College, where we have a big concentration of projects at the moment. Swales and conveyance systems, they're not quite the same as a ditch, but for the purposes of explanations, that's kind of where I tell people, you know, just a swale is just a better sized ditch. Usually a ditch will catch water and the water will just stay there until it's gone, but swales tend to kind of be a connection to get water to and from places. Permeable pavement is a popular one, especially in developed areas. It makes sense if the water's hitting the parking lot and it won't infiltrate. Well, let's make a parking lot that can accept a little bit of water and let it filter down. The one thing I've heard about those is the sites have to be chosen carefully, because if you put one in and let's say they have a construction project up the street and all that dirt and sand from the construction site runs down into that permeable pavement, it's going to clog it up and somebody's got to go clean it out, and that can be kind of a task. So, or in Raleigh, they built one right under a giant stand of oak trees, and that leaf litter just clogged it up in a heartbeat. But that's the things that those folks are studying so that they don't make those mistakes in the future. Regenerative stormwater conveyance systems, that's a very fancy name for water that is temporarily being stopped and then allowed to filter through like a sand berm or a big rock dam into another pool, and it's just like one pool after another after another after another, and it's just slowly cleaning that water as it moves down. That's one of the newer practices that I've learned about, and I'm hoping we can put one in at West Craven Middle School because they are in a great spot for one of these projects. Downspout disconnects, so easy. For some reason, a lot of people like to route their roof water underground into a pipe. And you don't have to worry about getting your feet wet as much when it rains, but it doesn't do much for water quality. It just shoots water into another location, and whatever was on the roof goes with it. Leaf litter, sediment, and bird poop, all the good stuff that winds up on the roof, Nerf balls, anything and everything. When we talk about water quality, a lot of people think chemical pollutants, gasoline, oil, detergents, and those are definitely not what we want in the water, but a lot of people don't think about sand and just dirt and leaf litter. And if a lot of that stuff, sediment pollution is what we call it, if a lot of that makes its way into a creek, it will just fill up the creek with sand, and that creek will cease to exist. That's actually a really big problem in places like Raleigh, Durham area, where they're building so fast, and all the stuff from the construction site just fills in the little creek, and it's gone. It's really hard to get them back after that happens. So sometimes it can be as simple as going over to your downspout that goes underground and cutting it and rerouting it to go over 30 yards worth of long grass, as I think somebody was talking earlier, which kind of goes to the next one. A level spreader is a fancy term for just evening the water out, if that term makes sense. Imagine a parking lot bumper, the thing that you're going into your parking space and it stops your tires. You kind of bury one of those or a glorified version of one of those in the ground, and when water bubbles up over it, it is released in a very big sheet. It's not channeled in a very small area. It's spread out, which is one of our goals. Lastly on here is a treatment train. If you ever hear that term, it just means that there is more than one practice treating the same stream of runoff. So somebody was asking me, they have a rain barrel at their house, and when it fills up and overflows, that water goes across the lawn. And the question was, is that okay, or should I put something else there to catch that overflow water that we know is coming? And I think we determined that the lawn area is sufficient to treat the water that's overflowing. But if you were to build a rain garden in the path of that overflow water, you've now created a treatment train, because it's getting slowed down and detained in your water barrel, which allows some of that pollutant to sink to the bottom. And then when it overflows, what isn't in the barrel is getting caught in the ground, and plants are using it. It's filtering down through the soil, and that's just, we love that type of stuff. So a lot of times you'll see people put a rain garden near a rain barrel, and that's usually for the overflow. Some common projects that you'll see all under the umbrella label of green stormwater infrastructure. We actually have a lot of folks that know about this. They're professionals in this, and they can design some really good practices. The next hurdle is getting people to pay for it, because I heard this term quite a bit. It got value engineered out of the plan, which means somebody thought it wasn't worth the money. And we always think it's worth the money, because these things, clean water, they are infrastructure in our mind. Just like a tree is treating the air, these things treat our water. in this particular instance, these rain barrels can be quite useful. Before I get too hung up on that, let me go to the next slide, because we do have some examples that I'm going to talk about with photos. This is just a quick little list of what's coming up. This is West Craven High School, not very far away, over in Vanceboro. This is a rainwater harvester that is being used to irrigate a raised garden area that the FFA program there has created. It's awesome. We love to see the water used in this way. That big black tank is a 3,500 gallon tank. The roof that the two gentlemen are standing on is what's being drained into it. And then there's a pipe running from that tank over to the garden that they can pump water through. There's a pump in that black tank, so they can plug it in and they can get a really heavy flow of water over to their garden. And they grew some fantastic looking vegetables in that thing, I'll tell you. And I think they turned around and sold some of that produce for benefit to the program. There's also a welding shop in that building, and anytime you're working with welding equipment and the potential for fire is there, a giant tank of water is not a bad thing to have hanging out. So we were just really excited about how that project came together. There's the FFA coordinator and the agricultural professor, William Shaw at West Craven, was a fantastic partner to have. He was just excited about it from the get-go. He got his students really involved. His students helped build those beds. They helped dig the trench for the pipe to go in between. They're the ones out there picking the vegetables and stuff and making sure everything's getting watered evenly. So very happy about that project. It's just come out of the year after monitoring phase, so it's very much in their hands, and I haven't heard any problems yet, so that's a good sign. I think we're going to circle back and try and put another tank there one day, because that thing fills up quick. And you'd be surprised how quick you could go through 3,000 gallons of water watering plants in dry weather. So that's one example of a success. This is just a couple of things I was spitting off there for folks that get a hold of this presentation and want to know more about our partners and what these actually do without me sitting here explaining it. Next up is Nash Community College. We have a lot going on up there, and we're about to wrap up with it. In this photo, you see two more rainwater harvesting tanks. There's 4 on that campus right now. 2 of them are 6,000 gallons, and 2 of them are 2,500 gallons. So together, they should have about 17,000 gallons of rainwater on hand after a couple regular storms. We size those tanks based on the roof area. So I'm on Google Maps measuring the surface area of the roof, and that guy, Mitch Woodward, he can really eyeball a roof and just tell you how much water you're going to collect, but there is a very specific equation that they use to determine how many gallons you can get off the roof. And we like to share that equation with the teachers after the fact. I don't have it memorized yet, unfortunately, but that's how we determine what tank goes where. And they all have pumps in them, except for one. They didn't have electricity at the building at the time, but the pumps that are in those tanks can pump 160 gallons a minute, because this campus has a water wagon that they drag around campus to water trees and water plants. Nash Community College is an American tree and bee campus, so they have some very specific plants and trees that they have to take care of to maintain that status. And rainwater is always going to be the best thing for your plants. It's got the nutrients that they need. And so we've talked about the rainwater harvesting cisterns there. On your left is a rain garden. It doesn't have any plants in it in that photo. It's since been planted, so there is native perennial plants in that garden now that are going to attract pollinators and birds and insects right in front of their auditorium and building. So we're excited about that one. We built another rain garden in a different part of campus. It's about half that size. And then to your right, we have a swale. It has a matting on it right there. That's why the sides kind of look yellow. This was kind of mid-construction. But that was a severely eroded area that was just getting hammered by water coming off a parking lot just way too fast. It was digging a hole about this deep, and then it would go a little ways and carve a channel and make another hole, and it was a tripping hazard, and it always had water in it. It was just a mess. So we just went through and widened it, made it into like a trapezoid shape, and resodded it with the same grass that they had there in the first place. And all we did there was to allow it to accept the water that it was getting, because it was just being overpowered. So pretty simple, straightforward. Everybody loves the rain gardens because after a good season or two, the plants look amazing and they're doing their thing. The swale, not so sexy as I say, because it's, just some people will still just call it a ditch, but it's important in my heart that we have good swales to convey our stormwater. And yeah, so a lot going on that campus. I'm working on designing the educational signs for all these projects right now. And yeah, some more information on those. The Epiphany School of Global Studies also could hit a ball with from here at that place. It's not very far at all. It's right behind our office over there. They even have a handy little trail that goes over to it. But we have some rainwater harvesters there. We love rainwater harvesters for a couple of reasons, as you can tell. They're one of the more cost-effective things to put in, and if you let them fill up and you put a little drain on them that allows the water to drain over 3 days, it's a stormwater practice because it's slowing the water down and it's letting it drain out in a manageable speed. But if you put the pump in there or hook it to an irrigation system or put a water hose on it, now you can use that water for whatever the campus can use non-potable water for, which I'm also all about. Sustainability is a big thing of mine, so if I can do more than one thing with the thing, then I'm happier with it. And in this particular case, they are taking 2 2,500-gallon water tanks on the backside of their school. They fill up, they're connected, so they fill up simultaneously, and there's a pump in there, and we pump that water under their circle drive over to their existing irrigation system. And now, whenever they go to water their field, it will use the water in the tanks first. And there's an automatic switch so that whenever the tank's empty, it goes back over to the well water that they were using to begin with. We just got that system up and running, and we're curious to see their water savings and what their field looks like, and if the system has any issues or anything. It's the first one I've had contracted out, and it's the first one I've hooked into an irrigation system. So the company that did it, they do it quite a bit in Wilmington and Durham, so I'm happy with it. And the school's going to be happy with it. It too is in the phase where I'm making an educational sign for it and working up some lesson plans for the teachers to use, stuff like that rooftop calculation. But also, think of an equation of yeah, this is a 2,500-gallon tank, but if we let it fill up and then we drain it and then it rains again, now you've got another 2,500 gallons. And over the course of the year, if you look at the average rainfall compared with how much we use the water, we're treating a lot of water in that method. So we love rainwater harvesting tanks. They're really cool, and they're not new. They just are kind of new around here for some reason. Places like Australia and really water-strapped locations, sometimes you're required to have these just to have water for your own home because they don't have giant aquifers to tap or anything like that. So a cool system out there, something that we can monitor easily, so I always like things I can go check out on foot and I don't have to drive slam to Raleigh or somewhere to go look at it. Next is Havelock High School. we did a constructed wetland down there. It was not near the size of the one at the community college that we were looking at a bit ago, but it is a good sized project. And on this particular slide, this is a screenshot of the sign that we drafted up. So this was your run-of-the-mill ditch. It was cut all the way down to nothing, and it was just a bunch of algae, and it was draining the student parking lot. So you can just imagine what winds up in there: masks, chip bags, leaking gas from vehicles, cigarette butts, whatever is in the parking lot goes straight into this ditch. And if you look at the sign and then look at the bottom left corner, it's kind of hard to see, but we try and show people where the water is headed. So in this particular case, a lot of people say it goes into the ditch. That's the end of it. That's not the end of it. It goes under the road, it goes through a neighborhood, and it goes slammed through the military base over to Slocum Creek, which is already an impaired waterway. So that runoff ain't helping. And so what we went in and we widened it like we did on that swale at Nash Community College, just to accept more water with less channeling. Just let it spread out, and we put rock check dams periodically. So now it's got to filter through some coral rock before it can get to the next zone and fill that up, and then move to the next zone, and so on and so forth. And in those zones, we planted native wetland plants that are designed to soak up water, soak up nutrients, and look nice and attract local wildlife and bugs and all the good stuff. Another thing is it catches a lot of trash, because just because we did all this doesn't mean the trash is not going into it still. It's just not rocketing through the system, out of sight, out of mind. That thing gets very trashy. And if you're the school principal, you might be a little concerned about that, because now you're having to stare at all the trash. But in my mind, and what I convey to volunteers and stuff, is that's the best opportunity to go grab that trash, because once it's in the river, it's a real pain to get out. I'm always happier to host a land cleanup than a river cleanup. If I'm hosting a river cleanup, I'm probably just having a good time paddling, because you're much more efficient on land when you can just take some grabbers and grab the chip bag out of the brush versus having to fish it out of a tree from a kayak or something. So we're trying to wrangle some students to kind of own that thing. Or I would love the football team to go down there and clean it out once a week. If you had 10 people, it wouldn't take no time. But anyway, you could do a study on what type of trash winds up in there. Garbology is the study of what people throw away, and it's a real thing. So lots of opportunities there. We try and educate people on what kind of plants we planted, some wildlife they may see in there. And also in that particular spot, we replaced some very worn out footbridges, which, is that necessary to treat the water? No. But it was a compromise, because we want people to see this thing and ask about it and interact with it. And to make that happen, we just decided we had the grant funding and the manpower to do it, so we replaced their really old splintery wooden bridges with some nice metal ones that are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And it's one of the main back and forth points for practices and games. So everybody parks in the parking lot, walks across our little bridge, sees our sign, looks around and goes, wow, that's cool, and then they go to their event. So another one that we're excited about, that one was wrapped up about the same time as our West Craven High School project. And there's some info on that for anybody who's curious about it later. I just saw something. It said average rainfall events. So if you're curious on how we design these things, like how do you know how big to make it? The engineers are much better at that than I, but the key behind it is what they call a design storm. And so that's pretty much saying that all these practices are designed to accept an inch or an inch and a half rain without being overwhelmed. But they are designed in such a way that we know they'll be overwhelmed, because sometimes we get 3 inches of rain in a hurricane or something like that. And you don't want it to just totally mess the thing up when that happens, if you know it's going to happen. So they take all that into account before they say, okay, this is the angle we need to use on the ditch bank, and this is how far we need to grade such and such. So there's a lot of details and a lot of planning that goes into this stuff. It's not just like, all right, let's make the ditch wider. It's more than that. This was the big one, and I kind of saved this for the end just because it was new to me, and so I already have a habit of taking too many pictures when I go anywhere. But it worked out in this case because I got to document the thing from start to finish, and it's really helped me out whenever I have a nervous principal or administrator who's wondering what the process is going to look like, and I can show them, you know. But anyway, this is what we had to begin with. Again, kind of run of the mill. Somebody's been mowing and weed eating this thing down to nothing so that it can move as much water as fast as possible from the parking lot to the swamp. That swamp and this ditch drain into Broad Creek, which drains right into the Tar Pamlico, not very far away. And the creek is already listed as impaired, so it's already got too many nutrients and sediment in it for our liking. So we dug the thing out a lot. We hired a company called Backwater Environmental, and they specialize in this type of stuff. Honestly, this is probably easy peasy for them. They do like dam removals, and they restore miles of wetland at a time. So they're a big company, but they love our program, and they share a passion for this type of work, and they respect what we're doing. So they're usually, you know, lately our go-to folks for this type of work, and I love working with them personally. But anyway, they took that ditch and they widened it into this big figure 8 looking deal. We had to do that because the main power line to the school runs right through the middle, and we couldn't dig on top of that or we'd have had some real big problems. So they designed it in such a way to accommodate that. But anyway, now instead of water just rocketing from the parking lot to the swamp, it has to meander through this long channel with deep pools, and it has to go through these rock check places and filter through there. We had that giant outlet structure down there. If you look at that bottom right photo, you can see where the water's being held back, but you can also see that little tiny PVC pipe. It's about that big. It's like a 2-inch pipe, and it is draining all that water at a calculated rate, so that, let's say it rains an inch today, and it doesn't rain for 3 more days, that thing should fill up and then go back down to a certain level over that time. If I go out there in 5 days and it's still slam full and I ain't had no rain, it's because my pipe is clogged, so I gotta go over there and bump it out. But what it's doing is it's holding back that water, and it is releasing it in a manageable way. So now that swamp behind it isn't catching all the chip bags and all the gasoline and everything, and it's not losing bank from really fast water velocities. The fish and the plants and everything on the other side of that wall are very happy and swimming around in nice calm water. That wetland, I believe, can now hold 145,000 gallons worth of water from your average storm. That concrete structure is designed in such a way that if we get more than an inch or an inch and a half of rain, it will kind of overflow in a tiered fashion. So if we get a hurricane, you know, this thing will still be there, and hopefully it'll have minimal damage. It won't treat every drop of water from a 3-4 inch deluge, but it's a heck of a lot better than that one little ditch, just getting it off site as fast as possible. And this is what it looks like now. Yeah. I had the people pretty nervous at that place because when we got through with the digging, algae mat just came over, and I got a call one day and they said, "Clay, this thing looks like it spawned the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Is this okay?" I said, "Just give it some time. You know, the plants that we planted, the guy assured me they're we also planted it in a bit of off season, so the plants didn't look fantastic when we put them in the ground. But when springtime rolled around and I got out there, finally the college was so concerned. I went out there with a garden rake and some boots, and I scraped out all the algae that I could get my hands on. And underneath were these beautiful plants that were just ready to pop up. And then we had about a week of warm weather, and it exploded. Those grasses were as tall as me in like 2 weeks. And that's a mixture of lizard's tail and rush grasses and lily pads. They're all selected to be planted in a specific location based on water depth, based on what nutrients they uptake best, based on what's good for a natural habitat. And if you go out there now, man, there's turtles and frogs and birds and everything. Snakes, yeah. Snakes are a tricky one. I love snakes. Also, they're a top predator, so to see one is a sign of a healthy ecosystem. It does not stop people from hating the things. Sometimes I think that's the number one reason that people cut their ditches so low. They just don't want any snakes. And I don't fight that battle all the time because it's hard to go against fears or something like that. But there's snakes in that thing, I can tell you, whether they like it or not. But I'm happy about that. So yeah, that's just a really successful project in my mind. We have the students, those students that we're looking at the sign, and some extra passionate staff members are keeping an eye on it for me. And they'll send me a picture every now and then so I can make sure everything's okay. It's close enough to my office I can go visit it, but I have to watch my time management because I'll spend all my time stomping around wetlands, and then they'll be like, Clay, you got to do X, Y, Z. I'm like, okay, fine. But yeah. And there's the stats on that. That was one of our expensive projects. That was about, that had to be over $140,000 to do all that, paying the subcontractors. They rented cranes. They had custom built things, and we paid engineers for designs and the whole shebang. So that was cool. I got to go out there and help put the plants in the ground and everything. I think the contractors were a little confused with my behavior. They were like, you're awesome, you're helping us, I don't know why, but I was just happy to be there and learn, so that was really cool for me. And then this is just a list of some of our partner schools that we've already been to. So on the left are campuses that we've been to with a team of engineers, and we've toured their campus and found some problems and found some opportunities, and we're really just waiting for grant funding to go back and do it. We've got enough projects in the hopper now that as soon as I get money for stuff, I can turn right around and put it somewhere, which is a good place to be. And then on the right are places that we already have projects, and I think I touched on all of them in Craven County. New Bern High School has a 5,000 gallon water tank with a pump in it, and I'm supposed to be helping get that hooked up to their irrigation system soon. It's a kind of a tricky situation, but we're determined to make it happen. In the meantime, it's a stormwater management practice because when they drain it slowly, it treats that water. And like I said, we'll be moving over to West Craven Middle School soon. That's a stone's throw from the river, so the impacts there are going to be immediately felt. And just to wrap up that situation, the entire campus is routed into underground concrete pipes, and every rooftop, every parking lot, every lawn area goes underground into the same pipe and comes out at the same spot about 150 yards from the riverbank. And there's a huge pit that's just been gouged out by all that stormwater velocity. There's not a bit of treatment going on before it hits the river. So we saw that and we were like, this is something that we can do something about. So the plan is to hopefully, as we get grant funding in, is to what we call daylight that water. So get it out of the ground, out of the pipes, let it flow across the grass, let it sink into the sandy soils before it hits the river. So that's our next big task, I would say. But I think that wraps up